Alright, we're back, and this time we're taking things to the land of the mummies. That's right, it's ancient Egypt, and nothing screams ancient Egypt more than aliens and gold. So, to keep with the theme, we're going to be heavily referencing the Cleopatra skin from Hunting Grounds. And before you comment, yes, I know it's a girl, she's also a mummy. It won't be one for one, but it's gonna be heavily inspired, to say the least. But without further ado, let's dive right in. First off, we're actually gonna be using up two figures for this guy, the Ahab Predator and my first Predator custom. Yeah, we're pretty much just gonna mix and match, taking the best parts from each figure, which is a necessity considering the legs on the custom. I had completely forgotten how badly I butchered him up, but that's okay because we're only here to salvage the chest piece and his bottom grippers. You see, a lot of the earlier Predators, especially the ones that use a jungle hunter base body, had huge bombaclat looking ass feet, so we're definitely going to replace them. And like always, we're going for the Predator suit method of breaking things down. While definitely outdated, I still felt a little sad about scrapping my first custom, but I'll get over it. Once everything is broken down, we can start building him back up, starting with the feet transplant. The ball joint is a little too big for our petite little feet, so we have to trim it down. I used an X-Acto knife to get the big chunks and the basic shape, followed by the Dremel to smooth things out. And after some work, we're left with a much smaller ball joint which fits nice and snug.
Alright. The feet used to be. That's crazy. Motherfucking Bigfoot's running around.
We finish off the feet with some light sculpting taken right out of the reference, and from there we move on to the wrist blades, which again won't fit our giant peg, so we fix that with a little bit more trimming from our Dremel. After which we can start working on the sculpt. Using some more epoxy clay, the first layer was just building up the form and securing the blades. They won't be retractable, but it'll at least look slim. The second layer is where I start adding in some basic detail, and I'm pretty much just pulling it out of my ass, but for shit, it doesn't look half bad. The last layer is all the fine detail, which I really tried to do by hand, but it kinda sucked, so I ended up buying the stamp, which we'll be using for not just the gauntlets, but the head crest too. It was a little annoying getting everything symmetrical, especially on a round surface, but in the end, it's a lot better than what I could have done. But keeping in line with the reference, we're going to be adding the finger armor to our hand. Now, this was the most tedious and time consuming part of the build, since you can only do two fingers at a time not to mess up the sculpt. That, and it's fucking tiny. Same with the knee pads, which after a quick trim, get some tiny ass jewels to spice things up.
For the record, my hands are fucking huge. So this is fucking hard to do.
On the thigh side of things, we're adding a little armor, and I'll admit this was probably the ugliest part of the build. I definitely could have tried a little bit more, but since it's gonna be covered up by the skirt piece, I kinda skimped out. But moving on to the chest piece, we're starting off with a collar using some thinly rolled out epoxy, followed by the actual cauldron piece, which despite the work I put in, ended up being a bit too lumpy, so I did have to remake it. Just goes to show, patience is key. On the arms, I knew I was only going to be using one of the shoulder pads, so I figured I'd add a little snake-shaped bracer on his right arm just to keep things interesting. This was just some more epoxy thinly rolled out and textured with a tool to resemble a snake. It also kind of just looks like a worm, but I tried. Now, originally, he was going to get a sculpted belt piece, and I really tried to make it unique, but it ended up looking so basic that I figured I'd just scrap it for some more cloth, so we'll come back to that in a bit. From there, we finish things off with some head, where we start off by giving him a bob cut right out of the Prince of Egypt. From there, we trim down the face, and I'm using the light up head from the escaped Predator since the mask is easy to remove and it's pretty much hollow, making the trimming process a lot faster. Now we're completely ripping off the whole mask design off the Cleopatra Predator, but imitation is the highest form of flattery, so there's that. There were a lot of things to do for the head, and they were all tedious and time consuming. things like adding caps for each individual dreadlock, along with figuring out how to make a durable but thin headpiece, which I ended up going for some PVC base with an epoxy sculpt right on top. We also bring back the stamp to make the crest, which is just the head of a beetle, but honestly, it looks pretty rad. From there, we put the whole thing together, and I gotta say, that's some good looking head. And that's pretty much it for the body, but we still have some weapons to make. And to my relief, I finally get to use just 3D printed sword pieces, which I'm pretty sure are about 5 years old, which is crazy. They both had lots of printing lines, and since that's always a dead giveaway to 3D prints, I ended up using a heat carver to melt the plastic down and sand it smooth, along with filling up some gaps with a little dab of super glue. And after a bit more sanding and priming, we have a pretty smooth looking blade. Now between you and me, I pretty much screwed up the first time, but thankfully we get to salvage it as a neat little blade by melting a hole and shoving in the spare blade from the Scarface Predator. Both pieces get hit with the same paint job, which is just a little brown and gold for the handle, along with some silver for the blade. It's pretty basic, but it's good enough. Originally, he was gonna get a plasma caster, but it got a little too clunky. So instead, we're gonna make it into a plasma caster handgun by taking some fingers and using them as a handle. And hey, that's pretty good. My brain's not too bad. Now with everything built, we are unfortunately at the worst part of the build, painting. Now, since most of the armor is sculpted into place, we're gonna have to do a lot of masking. A mummy's worth, if I do say so myself. This took about half an hour, but it sure felt like an eternity. From there, we start off with a few coats of primer, followed by a few coats of gold metallic paint. The hands did get a special brush on application since I was a little too lazy to mask it myself. Now, this is probably subjective, but I really hated how shiny he was turning out. It was pretty discouraging, but I was already balls deep, so I figured I'd just keep going and see what happens. On the details side, I started out by filling out the outlines in the armor using some black, along with some reds for the lights. The metallic spray paint had such a smooth finish that a lot of the acrylic didn't actually want to stay, but it did make cleaning up easy, so I did appreciate that. From there, we start filling up the jewels using a turquoise paint, which, no, I didn't spill. I don't know what you're talking about.
Son of a bitch.
The turquoise was definitely making a difference, and I did go a little overboard. At least originally, where I was going to have the thigh jewels be turquoise, but thankfully I ended up repainting them red, so disregard what you see. Now, sticking with the jewels, we're actually going to seal them using some UV resin, which was just a matter of dolloping each piece with a little resin and blasting it with some UV. This was probably the most rewarding part of the build, cause it turned out super shiny, and my dumb dog brain likes that a lot.
Nice.
From there, we move on to the head, which I tried painting by hand, but my regular gold was a bit too yellow, so I ended up masking the mask and getting the crest with some of that metallic gold. But like always, disaster struck as a piece of the crest literally fell off, just like my videos. Now, I wasn't about to resculpt it, so you know damn well I super glued that shit back on. I did try giving the mask a subtle gold hue using a little sponge, but as you can see, I don't know what I'm doing, so it came out looking like shit. That said, the gold highlights around the eye were definitely making a difference. But after a quick little repaint, we ended up with a good enough looking piece.
It's alright.
From there, we finish off the body with some Predator flesh tones, which always surprised me when I'm able to color match. After that, we hit everything with a black wash that unfortunately didn't really work on the metallic paint finish, just cause it wouldn't actually stay. Yeah, the whole thing was a double-edged sword. So it took a little longer than it should have. But now, let's take a step back and design this skirt piece. Originally, it was going to be this whole authentic wrapping, but like I said earlier, the belt just wasn't doing it for me. So, since we get rid of the belt, I can pretty much just streamline the design. We're only going to be remaking the main cock cover using some darker fabric. Unfortunately, the edges were really frayed, so I ended up using some super glue to keep them from falling apart. That said, it left dark wet stains on the edges, not made by me. So to combat that, I went for a gold paint job using the metallic spray paint. I didn't actually know or think it would work considering my track record, but as you can probably see, it definitely did. And with everything pretty much done, we can start putting the whole thing together. Starting off with the skirt piece, which is getting a little bit more glue to keep things in place. The torso is attached with a bit of epoxy and some contact cement. Same with the arms and the hands, which I might have overstuffed with epoxy, so the arms did end up a little lankier than usual. Contact cement is our best friend when it comes to flexibility, so we slap it onto the knee pads and the shoulder pads for some extra durability. The feet give us some trouble, but after a hot bath, they slip right in, just like your mom.
Oh, that's tight. That's real tight.
We top it off with the head and finish strong with an extra piece of cloth around the waist. And he's pretty much done. So with that, let's take a look at the finished product. Alright, here's our boy, and let's start with the articulation. The shoulder is a little limited by the shoulder pad, but hey, the other arm has unlimited range. The double jointed elbows work just fine, and the shorter dreadlocks actually allow for an easier rotation on the head, so he's pretty mobile there. His midsection is a little limited, just because I don't want to break anything, but he does have a full lap crunch. On the legs, he can do a full split without any problem. That said, he is missing his ass, which is a shame because I'm usually for the BBL. The foot joints are the tightest thing on this figure, so he's actually pretty stable. Onto the weapons, I left a little gap on the strap so he can actually holster his sword. He can also kinda holster the dagger using the belt piece, but it does look a little off. And lastly, we have the handheld plasma caster and the extra hand. It does fit a little loose, but it honestly makes him look really cool how he grips his guns. That's it! Alright, thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. What do you think? I think he's a little bit too golden. Definitely not my favorite piece, but let me know if you guys like it. What other custom Predators would you like to see? Don't forget to subscribe for more stupid shit like this. That's gonna do it for now, so stay poochy, and I'll catch you on the next one.